that military manpower of the United States, white or black, would be assigned to duties in the Army for which it is qualified. Military considerations alone should govern in war. 2, the Negro does not perform his share of civil duties in time of peace in proportion to his population. He has no leaders in industrial commercial life. He takes no part in government. Compared to the white man, he is admittedly of inferior mentality. He is inherently weak in character. And here's what they have to say about the black soldier. The Negro, particularly the officer, failed in World War I. The door will not be closed against him on this account. And it goes on and on to talk about how blacks could not stand the darkness, yet William Butler's courageous acts occurred at 3 a.m. in the Argonne Forest. There's no darker place on the face of the earth than that. And I could go on and on with the kinds of stereotypes, but if anybody has heard of Colonel Alan Greer and his screed against blacks, especially in the 368th, and especially the officer, that the only danger that they posed, the black soldier, was to themselves and to white women and children. And they were particularly hard on the black officer and said that black soldiers did not even want to follow black officers, that they preferred to have white leaders and especially white Southern leaders. Thank you very much for your attention.
Right along. Dr. Nikki Brown.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Dr. Brown, Dr. Nikki Brown. I am currently at the University of New Orleans and Emory University, where I serve as a senior fellow at the James Weldon Johnson Institute. I'm a colleague of Dr. McDaniels, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm going to start, I'm going to have brief remarks. I'm going to talk about African American women in World War I. I think give a very specific, detailed discussion of them. But I'm also going to, I like to take the long view. I like to take the sort of wide, broad view. What guided my research about African American women in World War I was this very simple quote that I came across when I was looking through some diaries. And that was this quote from a woman who was the head of a black women's organization called the National Association of Colored Women. And it was Mary Talbert who had said, "How can America treat her loyal blacks this way?" And that question sort of guided much of my research, because I think that we have to understand when we talk about military service and we talk about organizations that support the military, like the Red Cross at the time, or the YWCA or the YMCA, we have to remember very specifically that they weren't segregated in the sense you had African Americans here and white Americans here. They were whites only. And so these organizations, in many ways, prevented African Americans, men and women, from participating. So you have a relief organization like the Red Cross that did not allow African American nurses a role in their relief services. That's the role that I take, or that's the big view that I take. So specifically, what happened on this particular panel, which I think which really helps to inform my remarks, is that I think I was talking with Ron maybe less than a year ago when he was planning the panel, and I saw the people who are going to be on it, and I thought this is a great panel. You've got a lot of different perspectives. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. But I said, "Where are the women?" And Ron said, "Well, the women are coming." And I said, you can't have a discussion about African American men, particularly in this very important war, without talking about African American women. Because you wouldn't have a fighting force without the work of African American women. I mean, it's not enough. I mean, though it is important to talk about different regiments of African American soldiers, but we must remember that those soldiers were supported materially, spiritually, politically by African American women. The organizations that black women joined, they advocated for African American men and soldiers at a time when no one else did. So specifically, let's get down to the specifics of it. What did black women do? in this organization called the National Association of Colored Women, they identified the need. And the need was that African American men were probably going to get half the pay of white soldiers. Even though white soldiers were being drawn from all over the country. And in some ways, the treatment that white soldiers were going to get in the military was the best that they had ever gotten in their lives, meaning that white American soldiers drawn from rural areas were for the first time going to get 3 meals a day, going to get a roof over their head, going to get clothing and food. African Americans were going to get half of that, or perhaps a quarter of that. That means that they might maybe like they might get housing, but maybe the roof leaked, or they might get clothing, but the clothing didn't fit, and they most certainly didn't get live ammunition or live arms to practice with, and they weren't able to join the or enter the officer ranks at all. So what are African American women going to do? They are going to support African American soldiers, men, materially with things like comfort kits, going to send them care packages, going to get their groups together to sit together in a music hall, like a YMCA hall, and put together kits that had Bibles and magazines and chocolate and cigarettes and well, liquor wasn't available then. But that was what they were going to materially do. What they were going to do in terms of organizations, they were going to advocate that the Red Cross change its policies. Because specifically, if a African American soldier was injured while in France, he was going to need the help of a black doctor. But there weren't that many that were allowed into the military. There weren't that many, meaning, I mean, when I say that there weren't that many, I'm saying less than 50. There weren't that many black nurses allowed, less than 20. And how many African American soldiers were stationed in France at the time? About 200,000. So so these women are going to advocate that the Red Cross at least let black nurses serve, in which the Red Cross did not. They're going to advocate that the YWCA at least let African American women join the services, so that when they had their recreation areas that were not on the Western Front but part of the Western Front, they were going to do that. They were going to serve